careful, he might drool in your pancakes. That's what one of the boys in the next booth snorted when I tried to lift my coffee with my left hand. The only one I had left. I didn't respond, just kept eating slowly. My leg brace creaked every time I shifted. They laughed again, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. Then the door opened. A man in uniform stepped in, a Marine colonel. He looked at me, closed his notebook, and walked straight toward our table. If you believe true honor doesn't need to shout, comment respect below. It was just another quiet Thursday morning at Judy's Diner, the kind that blended into 100 others in the steady rhythm of my post-military life. Same booth, same waitress, same coffee, placed before I even sat down. 2 eggs over easy wheat toast, and black coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. The routine was as rigid as the physical therapy I still did every morning. Even 20 years after the IED took half my right leg and my entire right arm. They knew me here, not by name, not by rank, just as Mr. Charlie, the quiet guy with the brace and the beat-up camo jacket that had seen better days. Most mornings, the regulars would just nod or let me be. Judy, the owner, sometimes sat with me during lulls. Not for conversation, just quiet company. She'd lost a brother in Desert Storm. I lost most of myself in Fallujah. I never complained. Didn't see the point. Life goes on, even when parts of you don't make the trip home. That morning, I noticed a group of young men I'd never seen before. Maybe contractors. Maybe warehouse workers from the industrial park. 5 of them, loud, fresh-faced, full of themselves and the illusion of immortality. Their table was cluttered with mugs, syrup-soaked plates, and the casual disrespect of people who've never had to clean up after themselves. They stared when I limped in, the metal brace tapping like a metronome across the floor, counting their discomfort. I ignored them. You get used to stares, they become background noise. Present, but not worth acknowledging. I sat carefully, adjusted the prosthetic arm, reached for the menu. Didn't need to say a word. Sarah, my usual waitress, brought the coffee without asking. "Morning, Mr. Charlie." "The usual?" I nodded, offering a faint smile that felt heavier than it should have. The first insult came when I dropped my napkin, the prosthetic not quite delicate enough to grip it. As I leaned down, a voice rang out. "Hey old man, need a leash for that thing?" Laughter followed. The cruel, empty kind that says more about them than me. I smiled politely, didn't answer. There was a time I would have, when I commanded 300 men and my voice meant life or death. But that was a different life. Sarah shot them a deadly glare as she placed my plate. "Show some respect," she hissed. I waved her off. "It's all right. No need for drama." "It's not all right," she muttered, but moved on. I dealt with worse. In deserts, jungles, hospitals where doctors spoke over me like I wasn't there. Mockery is just noise. And I'd learned to filter noise out years ago. But they kept at it. Whispering, snickering. One of them even pulled out a phone and snapped a photo of my prosthetic hand as I reached for the syrup. Like I was some kind of sideshow. Other diners glanced up. Some with sympathy. Some with discomfort. None with action. That's the world now. Observation without intervention. I stayed silent. It was the only defense I had left. Until the bell above the door rang, and the atmosphere shifted like before a thunderstorm. A man walked in wearing a Marine service uniform. Not parade blues, but the working uniform. Desert tan, worn but sharp. Silver eagle on his collar, the rank of colonel. Ribbons on his chest told stories civilians couldn't begin to grasp. Service stripes down the sleeve long enough to shame a flagpole. He paused just inside, surveying the room the way someone trained to assess threats always does. Exits, faces, tone, intent. In his hand, a leather-bound notebook. His posture perfect, yet unforced. The young men at the next table quieted, unsure if they should laugh again or sit up straight. One nudged another and whispered something that came out more like a nervous chuckle. The colonel's eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. They held. A quiet exchange. Recognition without words. Born of shared wars and silent memories. He snapped the notebook shut, tucked it under one arm, and walked across the diner. His boots made no sound, the kind of quiet learned by those who no sound can kill. He stopped at my table, standing at parade rest. "Good morning, sir," he said, his voice clear as a bell. Then, in one smooth motion, he snapped to attention and saluted. Perfect, regulation salute. Not for show, not for sympathy. Out of respect. The diner froze. Forks paused. Conversations died mid-word. Sarah stood motionless with a coffee pot hanging in midair. The boys turned pale. One dropped his fork. It clattered louder than thunder in that silence. "Permission to sit, Sergeant Major?" the colonel asked, still standing at attention. I nodded, barely. Old instincts stirring. He sat without waiting for permission from anyone else. Crisp, deliberate. "Sir, it's an honor to meet you," he said, his voice genuine. "Your record's still used in officer briefings at Quantico. Fallujah, the convoy rescue." I recognized the brace. And the silence. I don't remember what I said in return. Maybe I smiled. Maybe I cried a little. 20 years of buried pride will do that. He continued, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I studied your tactics. Did 3 tours in Afghanistan. Carried your field manual every time. One of the men you saved that day, he's my uncle." The young men at the next table sat frozen. Comprehension slowly dawning. They hadn't just mocked a man. They had mocked a hero whose legacy they never cared to learn. The colonel turned in his seat, looked straight at them, and said a single simple sentence. "You owe this man more than you could ever repay." His voice wasn't loud. There was no anger, no aggression, just a quiet statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Then he pulled out his wallet, placed enough money on the table to cover not just my breakfast, but theirs as well. "Your meal is taken care of," he said as he stood. "Consider this a small lesson in recognition. One day you'll understand or you won't. But he'll still be the hero either way." The entire diner fell silent. A disabled veteran, a Marine colonel standing beside him, and the group of young men suddenly, unable to meet anyone's gaze. No smug remarks, no laughter, only the heavy silence of boys, confronting the smallness within themselves. For the first time, if you believe respect should come before regret, subscribe to Steel Heart Stories. After that morning, something changed at Judy's diner. That group of young men never returned. Or maybe they did. Quieter now, more humble, unrecognizable without the loud bravado. Either way, their booth stayed occupied, but by people who now glanced at my usual corner. Not with pity, but with quiet respect. And the change ran deeper than their absence. Strangers began to nod at me as I walked in. Small acknowledgments, wordless but genuine. Sometimes, I'd find my bill already paid, the benefactor gone, before I had the chance to object or thank them. Veterans, some I'd never seen before, would touch their foreheads as we made eye contact. Not quite a salute, but something close, a civilian echo of brotherhood. Word had spread, as it always does in small towns. Not my full story, that's still locked away, classified, redacted across countless reports. But enough. Enough for people to reconsider. The quiet man with prosthetics, who'd always been among them. A week later, Judy, the owner, placed a small brass plaque at my usual booth. Simple, understated, unmistakable, reserved for SGM Charles Weller, United States Army, Ret. She showed it to me and asked if it was okay. I said, "No, it's unnecessary, inappropriate, too much attention, for a man who spent decades avoiding exactly that." She smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes, and said, "Then it's even more necessary," and the plaque stayed. I thought about finding another diner, a new routine, another quiet corner where anonymity still lived. But there was something in this simple recognition, a sense of homecoming, after a long deployment, uncomfortable in its unfamiliarity, yet right in a way that mattered. Colonel James Harrison. I learned his name later, returned the following month. This time he brought 3 young cadets, officers in training. They hadn't yet earned their uniforms, but they were learning their weight. He brought them to my table, introduced them formally, then told them something I'll never forget. "This man," he said, gesturing to me with reverence, "is what grace under fire looks like. Not just in war, in life. Remember his example. When the world tests your character, in ways no manual can prepare you for." I didn't say anything, just nodded, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding it wasn't about me. It was about them, about the next generation, about lessons that can't be taught in drills. They didn't stay long. Military discipline doesn't allow for lingering. But each cadet shook my hand, my left one, calmly, without overcompensating for my missing arm, and without pretending not to notice. As they left, I felt something shift inside me too. A weight I'd carried for decades, like spare ammo on my back, suddenly began to lighten. They didn't remember me for medals, locked in a drawer at home. They didn't honor me for covert missions. That would never be declassified. They remembered me for silence, and what it meant. The dignity that endures beyond trauma. The strength that needs no validation. The service that continues, long after the uniform is folded and put away. I still eat at Judy's every Thursday morning. Same corner booth. Same creaky brace. Same cup of coffee Sarah tops off without being asked. The rhythm of routine keeps me steady, in a world that spins too fast, for those who've seen how fragile it really is. But now, behind my seat, there's a folded flag in the window. Judy placed it there after talking to Colonel Harrison. An American flag, folded into a triangle with military precision. Simple wooden case. No name, no dates, no explanation, just a symbol, and the shadow of stories behind it. New customers sometimes ask, "Who's the quiet guy in the corner?" The question always comes, when curiosity meets ritual. Judy just smiles and says, "He's the reason we stand when the anthem plays." She never says more, never mentions Fallujah, or the convoy, or the 3 weeks I spent dragging the wounded through hostile ground, with one working arm, and a tourniquet wrapped around my own leg. Some stories aren't meant to be shared over eggs and coffee. Every now and then, someone recognizes me, usually military past or present. They approach quietly, introduce themselves, sometimes mention a mutual friend, or a shared battlefield. I listen, I nod. Sometimes, if the pain allows, we talk briefly, but more often, they just acknowledge me with the subtle signs. Veterans share. Then they go back to their meals, respecting the silence. I wear like armor. Colonel Harrison still stops by. When he's in town, every few months, never makes a scene, just coffee, quiet conversation, measured in meaning, not minutes. No need for words. The respect is real, not the hollow sympathy people give the visibly broken, not the performative gratitude of political speeches or parades. Real respect, earned, given freely, not demanded, not offered from guilt, just because one man stood up and reminded the world that it mattered, that quiet heroes live among us, and we don't notice them until someone gives them a voice. That's the true power of recognition, not in how it comforts the honored, but in how it transforms the observer. Subscribe to Iron Souls if you believe silent scars and service deserve more than passing glances.